The divorce papers sat on the kitchen table between us like a wall. Derek pushed the settlement across to me, and his smile was the kind that made my stomach turn. "You get the farmhouse," he said, circling the line with his pen. "I'm being generous, Claire. Most men wouldn't give their ex-wife anything." I stared at the words. The old farmhouse in Millbrook, 2 hours outside the city, where we'd spent exactly 3 weekends in 8 years of marriage. The place had peeling paint, a sagging porch, and plumbing that groaned like it was dying. Meanwhile, Derek kept our downtown condo worth $600,000, the investment portfolio, the new BMW, and his entire retirement account. His girlfriend Vanessa sat beside him, perfectly manicured nails tapping the table. She smirked. "At least you'll have somewhere to live," she said sweetly, "even if it's falling apart." I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream, but my lawyer had already told me the truth. I'd signed a prenup 8 years ago when I was young and stupid and in love. The farmhouse was all I'd get. I signed the papers with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. Derek's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Foster, witnessed the signatures and slid everything into his briefcase like he was closing a business deal, which I guess he was. "Smart choice," Derek said, standing up and straightening his tie. "Fighting me would have cost you everything. At least now you have a roof over your head." He didn't even look at me when he said it. Vanessa looped her arm through his and giggled. "We should celebrate," she whispered, but loud enough for me to hear. "Finally free." They walked out of the lawyer's office together, and I sat there alone, staring at my copy of the settlement. The farmhouse. The place Derek had called a money pit and a waste of inheritance when his father William died and left it to him 6 years ago. I'd never understood why William left it to Derek instead of selling it, but Derek had shrugged it off. "Old man had weird attachments," he'd said. Now it was mine, and I had nothing else. The drive to Millbrook took 2 hours through winding country roads. I'd packed everything I owned into my beat-up Honda: clothes, books, my grandmother's quilt, and a box of kitchen supplies. Everything else stayed with Derek. The furniture, the flat-screen TV, the fancy coffee maker. He'd won. I pulled up to the farmhouse just as the sun was setting, and the place looked worse than I remembered. The white paint had turned gray and was curling off the wood in long strips. The porch sagged in the middle like a broken spine. Weeds had taken over the front yard, growing wild and tall. One of the shutters hung sideways, banging softly in the wind. I sat in the car for 10 minutes, crying. This was my life now. A falling-apart house in the middle of nowhere, no job since I'd quit to support Derek's career, and a bank account with $4,000. I was 41 years old and starting over with nothing. Finally, I wiped my face, grabbed a box, and walked to the front door. The door stuck, swollen from years of humidity, and I had to shove it hard with my shoulder. It finally gave way with a groan, and I stumbled inside. The air smelled like dust and old wood and something faintly like mildew. I set the box down and looked around. The living room had outdated furniture covered in white sheets, a brick fireplace that probably hadn't been used in a decade, and wood floors that creaked with every step. The kitchen was worse. Yellowed linoleum, a stove from the 1980s, and a fridge that hummed too loud. But it was clean. Surprisingly clean. No cobwebs, no rodent droppings, no signs of total neglect. Someone had been maintaining it, at least a little. Probably Derek had hired someone to keep it from completely collapsing. I dragged my boxes inside one by one, piling them in the corner of the living room. By the time I finished, it was fully dark outside, and the house felt enormous and empty. I made a bed on the couch using my grandmother's quilt and tried not to think about Derek and Vanessa in our condo. In my condo. I fell asleep crying. The next morning, sunlight poured through the dusty windows and woke me up. My back ached from the lumpy couch, and my eyes felt swollen from crying. I made instant coffee using a kettle I'd brought and sat on the porch, looking out at the overgrown yard. Beyond the weeds, I could see rolling hills, a line of trees, and open sky. It was quiet. No traffic, no sirens, no neighbors yelling, just birds and wind. It was the first moment of peace I'd felt in months. After my coffee, I decided to explore the house. I needed to know what I was working with. The upstairs had 3 small bedrooms, all empty except for one with an old metal bed frame. The bathroom had a clawfoot tub and tiles that were cracked but charming. The whole place needed work, but it had good bones. Back downstairs, I opened closets and checked cabinets. Most were empty, but in the hallway, I found a door I hadn't noticed before. It was narrow, painted the same color as the wall. I pulled it open and found a steep staircase leading down, a basement. I flipped the light switch and a single bulb flickered on, casting weak yellow light down the stairs. The steps were wooden and creaked under my weight. I went down slowly, holding the railing. The basement was larger than I expected, a long, open space with concrete floors and exposed beams. It smelled like earth and old concrete. There were stacks of cardboard boxes along one wall, all labeled in fading marker: Christmas decorations, William's books, old tools, Derek's father's things, stuff Derek had never bothered to go through. I walked along the rows of boxes, feeling like I was trespassing in someone else's life. Then, in the far corner, I saw a metal filing cabinet. It was olive green, old and dented, with 4 drawers. I pulled open the top drawer. It was full of papers, old tax returns, receipts, insurance documents, all belonging to William. I started to close it, but something caught my eye. The second drawer had a label taped to it, written in blue ink in William's neat handwriting. It said, "Property documents important." I pulled the drawer open. Inside were folders, each one neatly labeled: deed, surveys, tax records, utilities. I flipped through them, not really understanding what I was looking at. Legal property descriptions, maps with lines and numbers, old letters from the county. Then I found a black binder at the very back. It was thick, held together with metal rings, and the cover had a label in William's handwriting: Land Offer, Confidential. My heart started beating faster. I pulled the binder out and opened it. The first page was a letter, dated 4 years ago, addressed to William. It was from a company called Crestwood Development Group. I read the first line, and my hands went numb. "Dear Mr. William Patterson, we are writing to express our continued interest in purchasing your property located at 4782 Millbrook Road for the purpose of commercial and residential development." I kept reading. They were offering $8 million. $8 million for this farmhouse and the surrounding land. My breath caught in my throat. I flipped to the next page. The binder was full of letters, all from Crestwood Development, all addressed to William. They'd been trying to buy this land for years. The letters started 6 years ago, just before William died, with an initial offer of $5 million. Over time, the offers increased: $6 million, $7 million, and finally $8 million in the most recent letter, dated 2 years ago. There were also surveys, maps, and reports. I didn't understand all the technical language, but I got the idea. The farmhouse sat on 73 acres of land that bordered the new interstate highway. Crestwood wanted to build a shopping plaza, apartment complex, and office park. The land was worth a fortune. I sat down hard on the concrete floor, clutching the binder. William had known. He'd known this land was valuable, and he'd left it to Derek. So why hadn't Derek sold it? Why had he let me take it in the divorce? I flipped to the back of the binder and found something that made my stomach drop. A handwritten note from Derek, dated 3 months ago, clipped to a letter. The letter was from Crestwood, addressed to Derek, renewing their offer. Derek's handwritten note was short, scrawled in his messy handwriting on a yellow sticky note. "Wait until after divorce is finalized, then sell to Crestwood. V doesn't need to know Claire got the house, won't suspect. Transfer property back to my name after 6 months using clause. Easy money." I read it 3 times, my hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. He knew. He'd known the whole time. He'd given me the worthless farmhouse in the divorce, made me think I was getting scraps, while planning to take it back and sell it for $8 million. There was a clause. I grabbed the divorce papers I'd stuffed in my purse and flipped through them frantically. There, buried in the legal language on page 9, was a paragraph I'd barely read. It said that if I failed to maintain the property taxes or violated any zoning laws within the first year, ownership would revert back to Derek. He'd been planning this from the beginning. Give me the house, wait for me to mess up or miss a tax payment, then swoop in and take it back. And I would have had no idea. I sat in that basement, surrounded by William's boxes, and something inside me changed. I wasn't going to let him win. I spent the rest of that day reading every document in the binder. I took notes, making lists of dates, names, and numbers. Crestwood Development had been relentless. They'd sent letters every few months for 6 years. William had never responded, never sold. I found a handwritten letter from William, tucked in the back, that he'd apparently never sent. It was addressed to Derek, and it was dated 1 week before William died. I unfolded it carefully. "Son, I know you think this land is worthless, just an old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, but I'm leaving it to you because it's worth more than money. Crestwood has been hounding me for years, offering millions, but I won't sell. This land has been in our family for 3 generations. Your grandfather built this house with his own hands. I'm trusting you to protect it, not to cash it in the moment I'm gone. If you sell, you'll have money, but you'll lose something you can't buy back." I felt tears on my cheeks. William hadn't wanted the land sold. He trusted Derek to honor the family legacy, and Derek had planned to betray that trust for money. I called the one person I knew who might help me, my old college friend Patrick, who'd become a real estate lawyer. We hadn't talked in over a year, but when I told him what I'd found, he went silent. Then he said, "Claire, don't touch anything. Don't sign anything. I'm driving out to you tomorrow." Patrick arrived the next afternoon in a sleek black car that looked out of place on the Buffet dirt driveway. He was wearing a suit, his hair graying at the temples, looking every bit the successful lawyer he'd become. I showed him the binder, the divorce papers, everything. He sat at the kitchen table, reading for 2 hours straight, making notes in a leather notebook. Finally, he looked up. "This is fraud," he said bluntly. "Derek concealed the true value of this asset during the divorce proceedings. He intentionally misled you and the court. And this clause, this reversion clause, it's legal, but only if you violate the terms. As long as you pay the taxes and follow zoning laws, he can't touch this property. It's yours." I felt a wave of relief so strong I thought I might pass out. "So what do I do?" I asked. Patrick smiled. We beat him at his own game. Patrick laid out the plan. First, I needed to make sure the property taxes were paid, immediately. He checked the county records on his laptop and found that they were due in 2 months. "Derek was probably hoping you'd miss the deadline," Patrick said. "Don't give him the chance." Second, I needed to contact Crestwood Development directly and negotiate. "You're sitting on $8 million, Patrick said. "But you need to be smart. Don't seem desperate. Don't let them lowball you, and make sure the deal is airtight before Derek finds out." Third, we had to keep everything quiet. "If Derek realizes you found the binder, he'll try to interfere," Patrick warned. "We need to move fast and stay under the radar." I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. No, not hope. Power. For the first time since the divorce, I wasn't a victim. I was in control. Patrick stayed for dinner, and we talked strategy late into the night. Before he left, he squeezed my shoulder. "You've got this, Claire," he said. "William left you something valuable. Don't let Derek steal it." I watched his car disappear down the driveway, then went back inside and stared at the binder. This was my chance. I wasn't going to waste it. The next morning, I called Crestwood Development. My hands were sweating as I dialed the number from the letterhead. A receptionist answered, and I asked to speak with the person handling the Millbrook Road property acquisition. After a moment on hold, a man's voice came on the line. "This is Andrew Caldwell, Senior Acquisitions Manager. How can I help you?" I took a breath. "My name is Claire Patterson. I own the property at 4782 Millbrook Road. I understand you've been interested in purchasing it." There was a pause. Then his voice changed, became eager. "Miss Patterson, yes, we've been trying to reach the owner for years. Are you William Patterson's daughter?" "Daughter-in-law," I corrected. "The property was left to my ex-husband, and he transferred it to me in our divorce settlement. I'm the sole owner now." Another pause. "I see. Well, Miss Patterson, we'd love to discuss this with you. Would you be available for a meeting?" We set up a meeting for Friday, 3 days away at their office downtown. When I hung up, my heart was racing. This was real. This was happening. I spent the next 3 days preparing. Patrick coached me on negotiation tactics, warned me about tricks developers might use, and helped me understand the true value of the land. Friday morning, I dressed carefully, a navy blazer, simple jewelry, my best shoes. I wanted to look like someone who couldn't be pushed around. The drive to the city felt surreal. Just 2 weeks ago, I'd driven away from that city broken and empty-handed. Now I was driving back to negotiate an $8 million deal. Crestwood Development's office was on the 23rd floor of a glass tower downtown. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with modern art on the gym walls. I gave my name to the receptionist, and within minutes, Andrew Caldwell appeared. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and an expensive suit. He shook my hand firmly. "Miss Patterson, pleasure to meet you. Please come to the conference room." The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 3 other people were already seated, lawyers, I assumed. Andrew gestured for me to sit. "Can I get you coffee? Water?" "Water is fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. He poured me a glass, then sat across from me. "So," he said, leaning forward, "let's talk about your property." For the next hour, we negotiated. Andrew started by offering $6 million, claiming the market had shifted. I didn't flinch. "Your last offer to the previous owner was $8 million, I said calmly. "The market hasn't shifted that much in 2 years. Andrew smiled, impressed. "You've done your homework." "I have," I said, "and I know this land is exactly what you need for your development project. The highway access, the zoning, the size, it's perfect, so let's not waste time lowballing each other." One of the lawyers, a woman with sharp eyes, spoke up. "Miss Patterson, we need to conduct updated surveys, environmental assessments, and title verification before we can finalize any offer. That process takes time." "I understand," I said, "but I need a commitment in writing before we proceed, a letter of intent with a clear offer amount and timeline." They exchanged glances. Andrew nodded. "We can do that. We're prepared to offer $7.2 million, contingent on the surveys and assessments coming back clean, closing within 90 days. I thought about what Patrick had told me. "Don't take the first offer, ever." $7.8 million, I countered, "and I want a $50,000 deposit held in escrow to show good faith." Andrew drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. Finally, he nodded. $7.5 million and we'll do the deposit. Deal? I looked him in the eye. Deal. We shook hands, and his lawyer started drafting the letter of intent right there. I signed it an hour later, my hand steady. I walked out of that building feeling 10 feet tall, $7.5 million. The number was so big it didn't feel real. I called Patrick from my car, and he whooped so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Claire, that's incredible. I'll review the letter of intent tonight, but this is happening. You did it." I drove back to Millbrook in a daze. The farmhouse looked different now, not like a prison, but like a ticket to freedom. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and let myself imagine the future. I could pay off the few debts I had, buy a small house somewhere I actually wanted to live, invest the rest, and never worry about money again. I could go back to school, travel, start over completely. For the first time in years, my life felt like it was mine. But I knew the hard part was coming. Derek didn't know yet. And when he found out, he was going to lose his mind. I had to be ready. Patrick had warned me. Derek would fight dirty. He'd try to claim fraud, try to say I'd manipulated him, try anything to get the money. But I had the signed divorce decree. I had proof he'd concealed the value. And I had a good lawyer. I was ready for the fight. The surveys and assessments took 6 weeks. During that time, I lived in the farmhouse, fixing small things, painting rooms, making it feel like home. I didn't tell anyone except Patrick what was happening. Not my sister, not my friends, no one. I wanted to wait until the deal was done. Crestwood's team came out twice, walking the property with equipment, taking soil samples, checking boundaries. They were thorough but polite. Andrew called me every week with updates. "Everything looks good," he'd say. "We're on track." Then, 7 weeks after our meeting, Patrick called. "Claire, the assessments came back clean. Crestwood is ready to close. They're wiring the deposit today and we'll sign final papers in 2 weeks." I could barely breathe. "It's really happening?" "It's really happening," Patrick said. I hung up and walked outside. The sun was setting over the hills, painting everything gold and orange. I thought about William, about the letter he'd written to Derek, about how he'd wanted this land protected. I felt a pang of guilt. I was selling it, doing exactly what William didn't want. But then I thought about Derek's note. Easy money. He hadn't cared about family legacy. He'd only cared about cashing in. At least I was being honest. At least I wasn't stealing it. 2 weeks later, I sat in Patrick's office and signed the final papers. The wire transfer hit my account that afternoon, $7.5 million. I stared at my phone at the bank notification and started laughing. Then I started crying. Patrick handed me tissues. "You earned this, Claire," he said gently. "Derek tried to cheat you, and you outplayed him. Don't feel guilty." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Patrick grinned. "Now we wait for Derek to find out." It didn't take long. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered. "Claire." Derek's voice was ice cold. "We need to talk." "Hello, Derek," I said calmly. "What about?" "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "I know what you did. I know you sold the farmhouse." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "I sold my property, yes, the property you gave me in the divorce. That property was mine," he shouted. "You knew it was valuable. You knew I was planning." He stopped himself, realizing what he'd almost admitted. "Planning what?" I asked sweetly. "Planning to sell it yourself? Planning to use that reversion clause to steal it back from me?" Silence. Then his voice came back, low and dangerous. "You're going to regret this." Derek hung up, and 10 minutes later, Vanessa called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "You selfish witch," she hissed the moment I picked up. "That money should have been ours. Derek deserved that land. It was his father's." "Actually," I said, "it was mine. Legally transferred to me in a divorce settlement that Derek's lawyer wrote. If Derek had a problem with that, he shouldn't have given it to me." "He didn't know you'd find out it was valuable," she shrieked. "Exactly," I said. "He didn't tell me. He concealed it, which, by the way, is fraud." I could hear her breathing hard on the other end. "We're going to sue you," she said. "We'll take you to court and get that money." "Good luck with that," I said. "I have a very good lawyer, and I have evidence that Derek knew the property's value and hid it during the divorce. If anyone committed fraud, it was him." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt powerful. They could threaten all they wanted. I'd done nothing wrong. Patrick had already prepared for this. He'd sent Derek's lawyer a letter outlining the timeline, the binder, the concealed value, the reversion clause scheme. "If Derek tries to sue," Patrick had said, "we'll countersue for fraud and intentional misrepresentation. He won't win." Sure enough, 2 weeks later, Patrick called. "Derek's lawyer reached out. They're not pursuing legal action." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "It's over?" "It's over," Patrick confirmed. "You won, Claire." With the money in my account, I made a plan. First, I paid Patrick's legal fees. He'd been generous, charging me far less than he could have, but I insisted on paying in full. Second, I paid off the small credit card debt I'd accumulated after the divorce. Third, I bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood 2 hours north, near the mountains. It was nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a front porch, a backyard with an old oak tree, but it was mine, paid in full. Fourth, I set up investment accounts and put most of the money somewhere it could grow safely. I didn't want to be reckless. I wanted this money to last, to give me security for the rest of my life. And fifth, this was the part that felt best. I donated $200,000 to a women's shelter in the city, a place that helped women escaping bad marriages. I'd almost been one of those women, penniless and desperate. I wanted to help others who weren't as lucky as I'd been. The shelter director called me, crying, thanking me. "This will change lives," she said. I cried too, because it had changed mine. I moved into my new house on a bright Saturday morning in October. The leaves were turning gold and red, and the air smelled like wood smoke and apples. My sister helped me unpack, and for the first time in a year, I felt light. "I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging me tight. "You could have rolled over and let Derek win, but you didn't." "I got lucky," I said. "I found that binder." "Luck had nothing to do with it," she said firmly. "You were smart. You fought back. You won." That night, I sat on my new porch with a mug of tea, watching the sun set behind the mountains. I thought about William, about the letter he'd written to Derek. He'd wanted the land to stay in the family, to be protected. I hadn't been able to do that. but I'd stopped Derek from betraying William's trust. I'd made sure the land didn't go to someone who only saw dollar signs, and I'd used the money to build a life William would have been proud of, a life based on integrity, generosity, and independence. I like to think he would have understood. Maybe he'd even left the land to Derek, knowing Derek would mess up. Maybe he'd hoped someone like me would end up with it. I'd never know, but I was grateful. Life settled into a new rhythm. I went back to school and got my teaching certificate, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was supporting Derek's career. I started teaching English at a local high school, and I loved it. The kids were challenging and funny and full of life. I felt useful again, like I was contributing something real to the world. I made new friends, other teachers, neighbors, people at the farmer's market. I joined a book club and a hiking group. Slowly, I built a community. I dated a little, nothing serious, but it felt good to remember I was still a person someone might want to spend time with. Derek and Vanessa faded into the background of my life. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd gotten married, bought a condo, and were living their lives. I didn't care. They were irrelevant to me now. One afternoon, about a year after the sale, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Crestwood Development, with a glossy brochure inside. They'd broken ground on the new development, Millbrook Commons they were calling it. Shops, restaurants, apartments, parks. The brochure showed renderings of a beautiful, modern complex. I felt a twinge of sadness, thinking about William's farmhouse being demolished. But then I remembered it had been falling apart anyway. At least now it would become something useful, something that brought jobs and homes to people. Maybe that was its own kind of legacy. 2 years after the divorce, I was washing dishes in my kitchen when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Claire Patterson?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Who's this?" "My name is Diane Patterson. I'm William Patterson's sister, your ex-husband's aunt." I froze, water dripping from my hands. "Oh, hello. I heard about what happened," Diane said gently. "With the farmhouse and the sale and everything, I wanted to reach out." "I'm sorry if you're upset," I started, but she cut me off. "Upset? Honey, I'm calling to thank you." I was confused. "Thank me?" "My brother William loved that land," Diane said, "but he loved integrity more. He knew Derek was a selfish, greedy boy. He knew Derek would sell the land the second he got the chance. That's why William set it up the way he did." "Set it up?" I asked, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" Diane laughed softly. "William wasn't a fool, dear. He left the land to Derek, knowing Derek would screw up. He told me before he died, he said, if Derek is smart enough and kind enough to keep it, then he's earned it. But if he's the man I think he is, he'll lose it to someone who deserves it more." He was testing Derek, and Derek failed. I sank into a chair, stunned. "William knew?" "He hoped," Diane corrected. "He hoped Derek would prove him wrong, but he prepared for the worst. And in a way, I think he'd be glad you ended up with it. You actually needed it. You used it to build a good life." Tears streamed down my face. I wish I could have thanked him. "You already did," Diane said, "by not letting Derek win." After I hung up with Diane, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about William. He'd been a quiet man, kind but reserved, and I'd only met him a handful of times before he died. But he'd seen something in me, or maybe he'd just seen through Derek. Either way, his gamble had worked. I thought about Derek's note, "Easy money," and how that greed had been his downfall. If he'd just been honest during the divorce, if he'd told me the land was valuable and offered me a fair split, things might have been different. But he'd wanted it all. And in trying to take everything, he'd lost it. That's the thing about greed. It blinds you. Derek had been so focused on the $8 million that he'd missed the obvious risk that I might actually find out. He'd underestimated me, assumed I was too passive and too broken to fight back. And that mistake had cost him everything. I didn't hate him anymore. I felt something closer to pity. He'd had a chance to be a decent person, to honor his father's wishes, to treat me with respect, and he'd chosen money instead. Now he was married to Vanessa, probably still chasing the next big score, still believing that wealth was the same thing as worth. I hoped he'd learned something, but I doubted it. Some people never do. It's been 5 years now since the divorce. I'm 46, teaching full-time, and happier than I've ever been. I live in my quiet house near the mountains, with a garden I tend on weekends and a dog I adopted from the shelter. My life is simple, but it's mine. I started a scholarship fund with some of the money from the sale, the William Patterson Legacy Scholarship, for students studying agriculture or environmental science. It felt like the right way to honor him. Every year, 3 students get full rides to college. I get letters from them sometimes, thanking me, telling me about their dreams. Those letters mean more to me than any dollar amount ever could. I never remarried, but I'm not lonely. I have friends, family, work I love, and a life that feels full. I don't need someone else to complete me. I'm already whole. Sometimes I drive past where the farmhouse used to be. Millbrook Commons is thriving now, a bustling little town center with coffee shops and bookstores and families walking around. It's nothing like the quiet, falling apart farmhouse I inherited, but in a way, it's better. It's alive, and I think William would have appreciated that. Derek tried to steal my future, but he ended up giving it to me instead. The farmhouse wasn't worthless. It was the most valuable thing I've ever owned. Not because of the money, but because it taught me my own worth. And that's something no one can ever take away.